The A380 is a fun airplane to fly, as the only airplane with two full decks. It's gone through positive and negative public opinions in its lifetime, but unfortunately it didn't sell as well as Airbus had hoped, with Emirates being the only airline that was able to make it profitable enough to maintain. All Nippon Airways, one of Japan's largest airlines, currently owns a few of them, and they're flying only one route, Narita to Honolulu, Hawaii, which brings us to today's mission. We are in Honolulu, Hawaii today, getting on board the All Nippon A380 in business class, out to Narita on the 7.5-hour journey. All Nippon's check-in at this airport in Paradise is located at the far end of Terminal 2, near the United check-in, where flights to the US mainland must go through an agriculture inspection, but international flights do not, interestingly enough, so we walked right over to the counter for check-in. I was able to upgrade ahead of time to business class, and it sounded like the best chance of a first class upgrade was at the airport, although it ended up being sold out by the time I got to the counter, unfortunately. Recently, All Nippon has decided to deploy a second daily A380 on their Honolulu to Narita route, in addition to the Haneda flight, the 2 Japan Airlines Tokyo flights, and the 2 Hawaiian Airlines flights, as Japanese frequently vacation in Hawaii and vice versa, so the route's very full with tourists and business travelers, as Hawaii is one of the closest ways for Asians to visit America, along with Guam. Honolulu's airport, like the rest of the airports located here in Hawaii, are mostly outside, with enclosed air-conditioned gate holding areas. However, on top of that, you'll also find assorted shops, but more importantly, you'll find a number of gardens that you can access in the outdoor areas, free for any passengers to roam about while they wait for their flight. Slowly, we made our way over to the C gates, which houses most of the international flights as they're connected to US immigration, along with some of the B gates. On our way out, however, we also got the first view of our aircraft, the wonderful All Nippon A380. For those passengers who are unable to walk or maybe just want to relax their legs a bit, Honolulu Airport has a service known as the Wiki Wiki Shuttle, which is basically a roadway network that connects all the terminals by bus. You'll see plenty of signs for the shuttle, with stations by each hallway of gates. I decided to walk out to my gate. The walking was great, but in the summer weather, I definitely ended up a bit sweaty by the time I got to the C gates. It was nice to have some last bit of time in the island weather before leaving Japan, however, which luckily was also having some great weather, while I was there at least. The C gates, being home to most of the international flights, also had flights going to Seoul, Sydney, Auckland, Pago Pago, and both of Tokyo's airports with Hawaiian Airlines, Korean Air, Japan Airlines, Qantas, and All Nippon. The rest of the international flights were sitting at some of the B gates and some of the D gates. By the time I finally reached the C gates, it was definitely nice to be back in the air conditioning in the gate area after the walk outside all the way to the C gates. As you'll see here, all of the gate holding areas are completely inside, meaning that it's air conditioned, so for those of you who run a little bit hotter, you might find it better to hang out in these air conditioned areas. At the far end, however, we reach gate C4, one of the gates belonging to All Nippon. I was happy to see this as it's the closest to the ANA lounge. So close that we'll actually be able to board the aircraft directly from the lounge. Before heading up to the lounge, however, I took a moment to really marvel at the sheer size of this massive aircraft as seen from the gate area. This aircraft, built about 4 years ago, is one of ANA's few A380s and painted in their teal turtle livery. All of the A380s in ANA's fleet have the same turtle design on the fuselage, just in slightly different colors. And now what I'm really excited for, the beautiful ANA lounge here in Honolulu, located directly upstairs from gate C4. They have the lounge for business class passengers and Star Alliance Gold members, and then the other lounge directly adjacent for the ANA suites or first class passengers. Through these wonderful automatic wooden doors, we reach the main reception desk. After scanning my boarding pass, I was shown to the left side, which is the entrance for the Business Class and Star Alliance Gold lounge. Once inside the lounge, a small wall separated the first class and business class lounges. Funnily enough, we could see the top of everyone's head who was walking around the first class lounge just over this small wall. The textures used throughout the lounge is very flattering and in my opinion makes this one of the most beautiful lounges I've ever seen. Even the white walls and surfaces typically have more of a texture than just a flat white, and that combined with the wood accents really give the lounge a great feel and makes it more than just a special room for premium customers. It's a special room with a cool ceiling for premium customers. I was here about 2 hours before the flight, and so the lounge was still fairly empty and made for some great footage, but also gave me a great pick of seats. As you'll see in the footage, as we got closer to departure, it filled up quite a bit in here. I was honestly impressed with this lounge, considering it isn't even a hub for All Nippon, so it might be one of the better outstation lounges that I've ever seen. On top of the main areas, there's also some supporting areas. Areas for kids, areas for people to spread out, and it's pretty important considering you figure the fact that now they have 2 daily A380s to Narita in addition to the 777 or 787 flight to Haneda, depending on which day you're flying. The food inside the lounge was better as small bites and less stuff for full meals, but it was all wonderful food. First up was some small sandwiches and a salad bar. Next was the assortment of hot options including a tomato bisque soup with croutons, barbecue meatballs, Hawaiian chicken curry and rice, and the other side of the buffet mirrored the same with the same options. And then in the middle of the two sides was fresh fruit and these wonderful little acai bowls with fresh fruit, as well as next to that on the same counter being some chips and cheddar Chex Mix. Behind that was the bar to order drinks, along with some of their alcoholic beverages and their special handcrafted drinks, along with a fridge with some soft drink options. Once I grabbed some food, however, I grabbed a seat by the windows with a charging port to enjoy the views, while also enjoying the sandwiches and acai bowls, along with a nice handcrafted drink from the bartender. From my seat, I also had a great view of our aircraft, which had been sitting at the gate for a few hours since arriving from Narita that morning, with the great backdrop of Waikiki Beach and the Diamond Head Mountain. And as you can see here, the lounge definitely filled up, as there's 3 daily flights from Honolulu on All Nippon, all departing within a matter of hours, 2 of which being A380s, so there were plenty of passengers. Before long, however, they began pre-boarding, and so I grabbed a seat by the boarding gate, located right here within the lounge. They verified our passports and then allowed us to queue with these cute little turtle passes. First off, they boarded the first class passengers from their lounge through the upper deck jet bridge, as the upper deck is first class, business class, and premium economy from front to back of this A380. After all the first class passengers had cleared the lounge, however, they shut that door and began accepting the business class passengers. Then we finally had the chance to get on board and see our 121 business class configuration that's found on board this All Nippon A380. Solo travelers will want odd numbered rows as they're closer to the window and the counter provides a bit more privacy from the aisle. Travelers that are traveling together will also want the odd numbered rows, as the middle seats in these rows are much closer together, and like the window seats, the counters provide a little bit of extra privacy from the aisles. Our seat came stocked with a good amount of amenities that we will look through shortly. The only thing I will say is that I get the sanitation purposes, but plastic wrapping around everything individually just seems like a bit of a waste since it immediately gets ripped off and thrown away. Although it does seem like more and more airlines are moving towards more sustainable packaging, which is good to see. Looking around the seat starting in front of you, you'll find the seatback TV, which is a good size, but it does slightly bug me when the TVs are this reflective, as it's a little bit hard to watch things. Below that is one of the largest footwells I've ever seen. It's a great width, but honestly, it's so deep that there's just endless space for your feet, and I couldn't even reach the end. Beneath that is where you're going to find a little bit of storage, although unfortunately it isn't as deep as the footwell. So I couldn't quite fit my backpack, but it was great for storing my shoes once I slipped those off in flight. To the right of the TV is a coat hook, which was in a bit of an odd space, as it ended up blocking the right side of the TV screen if you hung anything up. Along my right side, on these odd numbered rows, between me and the aisle was the main countertop. Tucked into the countertop was the tray table. It came out with just the pull of a lever on the bottom. Unfortunately, it wasn't adjustable, so my seat had to be adjusted to be a little bit closer or further from that tray table. You'll also find the seat controls here. You'll see the presets for sitting or laying, and then the individual controls for the recline, the seat's position forward and aft, and the lumbar support. The countertop was a nice size and made for a great workspace while eating on the main tray table. And at the back of the counter was a little pocket with the air sickness bag and the A380 safety card. Attached to that is the headset holder that we used once we unboxed the headphones, and next to that is a reading light in addition to the overhead light. You can adjust the brightness of this one in addition to swiveling it to face whatever you're reading. You'll also find multiple used ports below that with 2 USB ports, a universal charging port, and your headphone jack. And right next to that is the remote. I do kinda like this design with a little touchpad to move your cursor on the screen, although it doesn't have a ton of buttons to control much else. Now the seat itself was definitely on the harder side, but it is a great width and there was plenty of space to get comfortable while relaxing in this seat. I especially enjoyed the accent design on the headrest as it was a leathery material rather than the typical cloth with the ANA logo stamped into it. One of the better features of the seats, however, was the storage cabinet along the window. Each window seat had one of these and it was massive, and also pretty much the only storage in the seat aside from the countertop. Then was the 2 windows at each seat, which is huge on the A380. The main drawback, however, being the distance between the inner and outer pane as you can see in flight. The size of the window is impressive as seen by the window shade, although the outer pane is so much smaller, and because it's so far separated it becomes tougher to film out the window, especially at one-time zoom. You'll see the edges of the window in pretty much every shot once we get in flight. And lastly, on the overhead panel, you do have reading lights for each seat, but unfortunately, no overhead air vents. Looking through the amenities we were given at each seat, first was the water bottle that was at each seat once we got on board. Then was the headphones, which had fairly good noise cancelling, but weren't the most comfortable unfortunately. However, once I waited to watch something, I was able to hang them up in our little headset holder. After that was the slippers, which also came with a shoehorn and a garment bag for them or your shoes while you're wearing them. And then the amenity kit, which came in a stylish blue leather type bag. Inside was some normal things like a dental kit, eye mask, and earplugs, but I did like the amenities themselves, which were from the L'Occitane brand, including lip balm and a body lotion. Then was the bedding, which included a few pieces. First off was the mattress pad. It felt cushiony and inside was a mesh type filling, weaved specifically to add some volume for comfort. The comforter that came with the bedding may have been the softest comforter I've ever had on an airplane, although I did end up with a few feathers stuck in my clothes from it. It was plenty to keep you comfortable, although with no overhead air vents, personally I got a little bit hot. The last part of the bedding was the pillow. It was definitely a great size and was definitely on the firm side, which is a preference of mine and fairly common in Japan. Fortunately, the side cubby was exactly the right size to fit all of the bedding to keep the space clear. It also fit a little bit more on top of that. Lastly was the pre-departure beverage, for which I chose to go with some bubbly. The A380's business class lavatories are a great size, although nothing compares to the size of the first class lavatories. Still, however, I did enjoy these faux wood floors, along with the black sink accents and the no-touch features, including the sink here and the trash itself. In the shelves in the lavatory were some extra dental kits and mouthwash for people who wanted to freshen up in flight. And lastly, possibly the best thing about Japanese aircraft restrooms are these built-in bidets, which you really don't find in the large majority of aircraft around the world. Back in my seat, I got comfortable and waited for departure, where I put on the slippers, which I guess are designed for people with hot toes. They also passed out the Japan immigration form so that we could fill them out in flight and wouldn't have the need to fill it in once we got to Narita, helping to speed up the process on arrival. Now it's time to push back and taxi out to Honolulu's very unique reef runway, built out in the water to increase capacity and support larger aircraft departing. It makes for a little longer taxi, but that gives me more time to enjoy this wonderful airplane. I've recently been burned by 747s retiring, as I've booked 11 different 747 flights and had 9 of them be equipment swapped last minute. So with the A380 most likely fading into the sunset, I'm just grateful to have been able to try out a few of them. I will say that I thought other than Emirates, the A380 would have been gone within a few years, but with Etihad, British Airways, and Qantas bringing a couple extra A380s out of retirement, and the capacity of these ANA flights being almost 100% full, especially in the premium cabins, I've been wondering recently if the A380 may remain around for a bit longer than I had originally thought. Let me know though, have you flown the A380? If you have, did you enjoy it and why? Personally, my favorite feature is that the sound in the cabin is so quiet that even on departure, the cabin feels much quieter than most aircraft would in descent. I also just can't help but think what these golfers think when they see this ginormous A380 passing directly past their tee box. In flight and connecting to the Wi-Fi, ANA has Wi-Fi on all of their A380s for a cost. I'd assume first class passengers probably get free Wi-Fi, but in business class it's full fare. Although I was very happy to see full flight Wi-Fi available. Wi-Fi can be purchased for 20 minutes for about $7, 3 hours for about $17, or the full flight for $22, all US dollars. I just have to wonder when all Wi-Fi will be free in the aviation world. And while I was grateful to have Wi-Fi, it was incredibly slow. While I couldn't do much with it, I was definitely at least able to enjoy social media or Google with a little bit of patience. Definitely better than not having Wi-Fi, and being able to purchase the full flight is always a big time win. Next, it's time to check out the in-flight entertainment options, where we have 3 tabs labeled as Entertainment, Shopping, and Flight Info, each with a few selections on each page. The entertainment starts with the movies. From the main page, you can scroll through all the options or filter them by language or genre. Since I wanted to watch something familiar, I went to the Hollywood section, which had by far the most English options that weren't kids' movies. There wasn't too big of a selection, but still a few good movies that I was interested in. Part of why it looks like there's more options is because each movie that was available in multiple languages showed up once in each language. I was definitely grateful, however, to be able to add things to favorites, which is something I do like seeing as it makes it super easy to find, basically creating a section of the entertainment made up of my favorite things. TV shows were also sortable with the same filters as movies, but with more genres available. The only problem is that there weren't a ton of American TV shows, which is totally okay considering the amount of different places they fly, but meant that I would probably stick more to movies than the single episode of Friends. It was also the first time I've seen a collection of TikToks available to be viewed from a seatback TV screen. Something that ANA hit right on the head was the audio selection. They had a large number of genres and artists, including full albums of theirs and full albums of top hits. I even saw some lady across the aisle from me absolutely vibing to some Tchaikovsky. I was also excited to see a few live TV options, including CNN News, Japanese news, and a sports channel. There is also a section of ebooks, which includes mostly Japanese books and a lot of travel-based electronic booklets. After the entertainment tab came the shopping tab, and this included most of the duty-free items. And y'all, they were shopping that duty-free stuff and the ANA shop items throughout this entire flight. And lastly is the My Flight tab, which starts with the flight map. I did enjoy this map, which was completely adjustable. Not only can it be zoomed and moved around, but there's also a large assortment of views that you can put the map in. You also have access to the different flight cameras, which are standard on the A380s. There's 3 cameras, one that points forward from the nose, one that points straight down, and then one that points forwards mounted on the tail. The final thing in the My Flight tab was videos to help with travels. It has videos about Tokyo immigration, onboard Wi-Fi, instructions on how each of the seats on board work, and more about the ANA product. And one of the better things about the screens is that you can multitask. In addition to being able to activate the picture-in-picture mode while you continue browsing, you're also able to open up a little flight info tab on the top of the screen while watching something. And while I was touring the entertainment screens, the flight attendants came around to pass out the menus for us. These menus are applicable for specifically the flights to and from Honolulu, starting off with the culinary team that helps to build these wonderful meals. The next page had some information regarding the wines and champagnes on board. Next was the rest of the beverages, with the left side being all of the alcoholic options on board, and the right side being all the non-alcoholic options, including the ANA original drink, which definitely piqued my interest. The next 2 sets of pages were all food options. First up was for the flights departing Japan to Honolulu, but then the next page was the flights departing Honolulu heading back to Japan. So I spent a bit of time examining what my options would be on this flight, which was scheduled to have a full lunch meal and a snack service as well. And the bottom of that page also had a number of things that could be eaten throughout the flight if you got hungry between meals. We were then handed these warm, damp towels, signaling the approach of the lunch service. They gave us our ANA placemat, followed by the amuse-bouche and beverage choice, for which I had to try out the ANA original drink, which was essentially a Japanese lemonade. The starter had 2 small bite-sized items, including one with smoked salmon and one with spam and cheese, a commonly used ingredient in Hawaii. They then came through the cabin to hand out the main course. We were able to choose either the Japanese or Western option. As they say, when in Rome, or Japan or something, so I had to try the Japanese option on board one of Japan's largest airlines, which included things like bite-sized morsels of yuba and sardines, pickled ginger, prawn, and scallop. The main focus was a gold-striped amberjack teriyaki with steamed rice and some fresh fruit on the side. For dessert, they passed out single servings of this vanilla Haagen-Dazs. Once they collected all the items from the meals, they came through the cabin asking if anyone wanted a hot beverage, and I decided to wrap up my meal with a nice green tea. Once the lunch wrapped up, we were about 5 hours from Narita and solidly over the Pacific, which was a great time to look at the seat modes of this A380 business class seat. First off, you can see the fully seated position for takeoff and landing. The seat itself is kind of hard, but is definitely plenty wide. Something I found interesting, however, is that there was no adjustment for any leg rest. That's probably because there isn't a leg rest, which explains why the fixed footrest is so much larger than normal. You do have the ability to slide this whole seat forward so that it can be up against the footrest. So no matter what your height is, you can move it up enough to put your feet up, although you won't be able to use the tray table since it doesn't slide forwards or backwards. You can also use the preset to lie down. You can hold it down and then let go when it's where you want it, or just press it once and it will go full flat, and vice versa for sitting up. I just didn't realize this till later. You'll also notice that as the seat reclines, the armrest moves down automatically, so you have a comfortable place to rest your arm. And once you lie completely flat, it's flush with the seat, making the bed just a little bit wider. Once the bed is fully flat, it meets up with the footrest and makes one complete surface, the armrest making it fairly wide. Making the bed starts with the mattress pad. It doesn't quite reach the footrest, but does cover the entire section for your upper body, however. Unfortunately, it wasn't as comfortable as I was hoping, but it definitely helped since the seat itself was kinda hard. Next was putting down the comforter. This may have been my favorite part of the bedding, just because of how soft it was. It was a bit too hot for me in the cabin, and the comforter probably would have made me a little bit too hot. But the last piece was the pillow. I prefer firmer pillows, so this pillow was perfect. It was a great size and allows for some tossing and turning. Altogether though, it was a pretty nice bed, and aside from the temperature, I'm convinced I'd be able to get some real good sleep in this seat if this were an overnight flight. You can see now that once we're actually lying down in the seat, just how much space I have on either side of me for sleeping in pretty much any position that I'm comfortable in. In addition, because of the sheer size of the footwell, there is plenty of space for your feet as well no matter how you sleep. I had space both lying on my back and lying on my side. And if you want to sleep without interruptions, you can use the Do Not Disturb button, which turns on a little light on top of the seat to tell crew that you'd like to be left alone for the time being. I'd say that the only thing that's a little funky about the seat was that the tray table didn't slide forwards or backwards, or at least if it did, mine was jammed. This meant that pretty much, unless you were in a fully seated position, it didn't really sit right. You can see me here in a slightly relaxed position getting some work done, and the tray table doesn't really open over my knees. But even if I do lower my knees, it can't open all the way as it hits against my torso, so I ended up with my seat in a fully seated position in order to get some work done or eat, even with the seat slid as far back as it could go. A little over an hour from the coast of Japan, they served our final and smaller meal. On a 7.5 hour flight, we get one full meal and one snack prior to arrival. Today's pre-arrival snack included a vanilla yogurt with berry sauce on top that I ended up mixing in. That was in addition to what was labeled as a barbecue chicken sandwich. It was like a bread pocket of marinated chicken. It was less of an American-style barbecue sauce and more of a typical Asian barbecue flavor marinated chicken. I also found that with the countertop to the side, I still had space to work while I was eating this meal. And just like with the other meal service, we were offered a hot beverage to wrap it all up, and considering this was my last touch of ANA, I decided to get a nice bit of green tea. Soon enough, we were approaching the east coast of Japan as we neared our descent into Tokyo's Narita Airport. And now some last bit of thoughts as we taxi into our gate here at Narita's Terminal 1. Terminal 1 is the largest terminal at Narita and is home to most of the Star Alliance and SkyTeam carriers, as ANA has the most flights from the terminal. Terminal 2 is host to the Oneworld carriers and some leftover Star Alliance and SkyTeam members, while Terminal 3 seems to be mostly budget airlines, although in all fairness I've never actually entered Terminal 3 at Narita. Now for thoughts on the ANA A380 business class. For starters, this was also my first ever flight with ANA, and so I wanted to think about that airline as well. Previously, I've flown with Japan Airlines' business class as part of my series The Ones, and so it was great to compare the two. Personally, I believe ANA is a wonderful representation of Japanese culture. The crew was easily one of the best crews I've ever come across in my travels. They were fun, they were attentive, they acted like they wanted to be there, and they were insanely respectful, as Japanese culture values respect very highly. The seats on this aircraft were wonderfully designed. They were wide, and so you could really get comfortable. The other big positive, literally, was the storage bin along the window. Since I didn't necessarily want to keep my backpack at my seat with me, it was nice to have storage space for literally everything I needed, which is tough to find in a lot of business classes. There were only a couple drawbacks. First off, not having a leg rest was interesting, and they did make up for it by having a great footrest, so you could easily reach it, which brings me to my other main drawback of the seat, which is that the tray table doesn't fit too well in a relaxed position. Fine for eating, but working in a relaxed position would have been nice. The food on that note was also incredible. I chose the Japanese cuisine, which is very seafood centered but was very tasty. Each piece of the meal seemed to be perfectly crafted to build the perfect meal. Even though it was on a single tray, the presentation and flavor made up for it. Aside from ANA specifics, the other part of the flight that deserves some attention is the A380 itself. The fact remains that it's the quietest airplane I've ever flown on, and its massive size makes a 121 business class setup feel a little bit extra spacious and comfortable than other aircraft. All those wonderful in-flight aspects, but honestly one of my favorite parts of the journey was the ANA lounge in Honolulu, especially considering the boarding directly from the lounge, which I've only ever found with Emirates. So if you know of any other lounges like this in the world, definitely let me know. I honestly think that this product is amazing, and the A380 is an incredible aircraft. I just wish ANA was able to find some success with this aircraft so that we could see it in more places, as they really do have a wonderful setup with it. Unfortunately, ANA's A380s were about as successful as anyone else's, and so I'm not sure how long we'll see them around. Fortunately, because of the density on the Tokyo to Honolulu route, there's still a fair chance that they keep the A380 around for this service. In the summer, you've got people from Hawaii vacationing in Japan, and vice versa. And in the winter, you've got people leaving the snowy climate of Japan for the island getaways of Hawaii. Not to mention the amount of business done between these two places. Other than that, I welcome you all to Japan. Narita is one of two airports in the Tokyo area, along with Haneda. Haneda was the main airport for Tokyo, but with the demand and size of the Tokyo aviation market overgrowing it, Narita was built to allow for greater expansion. Initially, Narita was meant to take most of the international load, but now they both share domestic and international service, although Haneda still has many more passengers each year. Now, both airports are sizable aviation hubs supporting millions of passengers per year. Perhaps the biggest drawback is that since they're both hubs for ANA and Japan Airlines, giant transcontinental airlines, it's not uncommon for an itinerary with a Tokyo connection arriving into one of the airports and departing the other. Be aware of this when booking, but if you do have to make that transfer, there are buses and trains that connect the two airports. Neither are all that expensive, but it can take over an hour to make the journey, and you'll obviously have to pass through immigration and enter Japan, so just make sure to plan for that. So let me know your thoughts on everything we talked about in this video, and until next week, safe travels, and I'll see y'all next time.